Welcome to a deeper dive where you, the viewers, get an opportunity to get some backroom information so that you can get the deeper lesson presented in each episode of Fix My Life and do your own work at home. And this week, we did a lot of work with Taryll Jackson, Taryll Jackson's son, Michael Jackson's nephew, and his long-time living girlfriend, Breana. Now, Taryll and Breana had been together for 12 years. They had 2 children. They lived in the same house, and they were separated. They were separated in mind, they were separated in heart, and very often they were separated in spirit. And they came because they wanted to find out how to bring their relationship back together. Now, the interesting thing about Taryll and Breana is that Taryll was a Jackson. Yes, he was Michael Jackson's nephew, probably one of his favorite nephews. So along with just the normal everyday dynamics of a relationship came the pressures of being a Jackson. And so much of the work that I did with Taryll was getting him to understand who he was as a man, as a father, as a partner, as an individual separate from the Jackson name, because a great deal of what they had to deal with in their relationship came from the fact that he was a Jackson. And the work I had to do with Breana had to do with the fact that she had hooked up with a Jackson, although she was never really either aware or willing to be aware of her motivations in the beginning for being in relationship with a Jackson. That happens sometimes. Some people marry money, some people marry name, some people marry a fantasy. I think in this case, all 3 were going on. So the work that they had to do in their relationship was real simple. They had to tell the truth. They had to tell the truth. This is a relationship where neither person was telling the absolute truth about how they felt, about what they wanted, about what they needed, and instead they just separated little by little by little. He was sleeping in the studio and she was sleeping upstairs. She was a stay-at-home mom and had no idea where her next dollar or dime was going to come from, because she had given Taryll total control over her finances, over the family's finances, and toward the income, which made her feel dependent and which made him controlling. 2 things that don't mix well in a relationship. When one partner controls the purse strings and the other partner feels totally dependent upon them, they feel that they cannot say what they need to say. You see, it's difficult to tell someone the truth when you believe they have something that is essential to your survival. It happens all the time at work. People will allow supervisors and co-workers to treat them in all manner of horrible ways because they're afraid to speak up, thinking they'll lose their job. Well, that's one thing at work. But at home, when you feel you can't speak up to your partner, you will find other ways to get your point across. And we saw a little bit of that here. We saw how Breana would call Taryll names. Now, his mistake was he didn't respond to it. I told you in the last episode of Deeper Dive, when we were looking at Neffy and Shelby, when a partner displays behavior that is disturbing or disrupted, call it on the spot. Don't let them get away with it, and make a specific behavior change request. Unfortunately, Taryll heard it. He was hurt by it, and he said absolutely nothing. That did not turn out well for him, because that let Breana know that she could do it again and again and again and get away with it. And what that did was it eroded the fibers of their relationship. Happens all the time. Please know that sooner or later, if you continue to call your partner names, if you continue to demean, diminish, belittle your partner, they're going to tune you out, turn you off, and move away from you. That is exactly what happened here. 2 people living in the same house together, but actually being separated. There also came a point where Breana admitted that she didn't know if she wanted to be with Taryll anymore, but She was afraid to move out on her own. Go figure. You know, it happens all the time to women when they become dependent on their partner. Oh, it happens to men too. When one partner is dependent upon another and they don't think that they have what's required to get out and stand on their own, they'll stay and be miserable and mean. Happens all the time. Taryll also didn't know whether or not he still wanted to be in a relationship, but he didn't leave because he thought Breana would withhold his children. Let's just go ahead and talk about that. I'm a woman, and I have to acknowledge and admit that I know of cases, and I've seen cases, where the woman will use the children as weapons against the man. Now, in one of my very early episodes of the R Spot, I talked about how to create a co-parenting situation. I talked about what to do when you are the one being left, because it is never okay to put children in the middle of a breakdown between adults. These two people didn't want to be together, but wouldn't leave because they were afraid of what the other one would do. Breana was afraid she wouldn't get child support, and Taryll was afraid that she would withhold the children. That is no reason to stay in a relationship, okay? Tell the truth. Ask for what you want. Make a specific behavior change request, and do what is required to maintain your own sense of well-being. A relationship cannot survive on what you are afraid will happen. It can only survive on what you nurture and feed it so that it will grow. Taryll and Breana are an absolute magnificent demonstration of what happens when people are afraid to leave. They loved each other, but they simply had given up on trying to work things out. Too much water under the bridge. Too many things said, and because they hadn't told the truth, neither one of them really knew the other. These were two people who didn't even know each other. They liked certain things about each other. They liked what they had created together, but they definitely didn't know each other. So the work that we did together was really about just opening a channel of communication, giving both of them permission to say what they really felt, and also dealing with just a little bit of childhood trauma, particularly for Taryll. Having been violated as a child and having never spoken about it, he wasn't even aware of how it was impacting him in his relationship. Also, the mere fact that when Taryll didn't speak up about his mother's relationship, his mother was murdered, and he was holding himself responsible. So he had a little personal work to do that probably kept him somewhat unavailable to Breana. And Breana had some work to do around her mother and how she had been trained by her mother and her judgments of her mother and her unforgiveness of her mother's very direct and aggressive behavior. So these two people had some stuff that they weren't even aware existed because they had gotten caught up in the fantasy of their relationship. And Taryll also had to do some work on separating himself from the family reputation and the family expectations. And Breana had to do some work about what she expected from Taryll because of who he was and because of his family. But since they hadn't told the truth about that, they didn't even know there was a problem. So the work that we did together brought up some common issues. Think about it. Are you telling your partner the absolute truth about how you feel? Are you telling your partner the absolute truth about what you want? And are you telling your partner the absolute truth about who you are? You can be in a relationship together and be separate because you simply haven't told the truth. Now, most of us don't have to deal with a famous family name, but some of us do have to deal with our family history and our family reputation and how that impacts our relationship. For Taryll and Breana, it was a very public family name with a lot of drama and trauma and tragedy. But what about if it's just that your father were a lawyer, a doctor, a policeman, and what you want to do is curl hair or sell cookies? What is it that you think you have to live up to that you're not? And how is that impacting your relationship? Or what if your father were a convicted felon or absent, or your mother, and you're living down to a pathology that has nothing to do with who you are and what you want? It doesn't matter whether it's higher or lower. What matters is that you tell the truth about what you feel, what you want, and who you are. And we saw that when Breana and Taryll did not do that, it had a dangerous impact on their business. Now, you'll see from the follow-up that Breana and Taryll have separated. I don't want people to think, oh my God, she's going to come in my house and my marriage is going to fall apart. No. What happens is when you tell the truth, you find the courage to set yourself free. That's what happened with Nefertiti and Shelby. That's what happened with Taryll and Breana. And just so that you know, we do offer all of our guests aftercare. They have counseling, they have access to a therapist, they have access to our coaches. So we don't just go in and disrupt their lives and leave them on their own. So both Taryll and Breana had help afterwards, and they came to the decision that supported them. Also, some of our guests are offered the help and they don't take it. That's not on us, that's on them. So next week, next week we are dealing with a family curse. One that we don't often talk about. The curse that happens when mothers abandon their children. Next week you'll meet the Burton family, a mother and her 6 daughters who are struggling to build a relationship and to define family beyond just being related by blood. It is a 3-part story, and trust me, you don't want to miss an episode. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.